Consider for a moment what is actually happening inside the device in your hand. The artificial intelligence you speak to, the system that answers you in fluent sentences, is at the most basic level an electronic machine. Beneath every clever reply, beneath every image it conjures, there are switches turning on and off at a speed you cannot imagine. That is the whole secret, and the entire electronic age, the half-century of patient work that produced the thing you are holding, was really one long project to turn a single, strange idea into that machine. You may suspect that computers are a closed box, a thing built by other people for other people, sealed shut and never meant to be understood by you. I would like to refuse that idea, gently and completely. The box can be opened. We are about to open it together, and what is inside turns out to be far more human than you ever imagined. Let me take you back to the 1930s. By then, humanity already had a long story of calculation behind it, centuries of devices built to handle numbers. A century earlier, Ada Lovelace had even glimpsed a machine that might follow written instructions. And then the trail had gone quiet, the idea left dormant. Every device that did exist could do only the single task it had been built for. Change the task, and you had to build a new machine entirely. There was no general instrument. There was only a workshop full of specialists, each one mute outside its narrow purpose. And then, in 1936, a young English mathematician asked a question that changed everything. His name was Alan Turing. Could there be a single machine that performed any calculation at all, provided you simply gave it the right instructions? Not a new device for each problem, but one universal engine that could become whatever the instructions told it to be. This was not an object, it was a proof on paper, an argument made in pure mathematics by a man who had no way to build the thing he was describing. Turing could see the shape of it with absolute clarity. He simply could not yet hold it in his hands. There is something strange in that. The thinking machine began its life as an idea so precise it could be written down, years before a single wire was laid. It was never a fantasy. It was mathematics, waiting. So the work began to give that idea a body. The difficulty was physical. The early calculating devices moved through gears, levers, and mechanical relays, parts that had to physically shift to do their work. Such parts are slow, and they wear, and they jam. A machine built from them could never be fast enough to matter. The breakthrough was electronics. An electronic switch has no moving parts at all. It changes state through the flow of current, and it does so thousands of times faster than any lever could ever swing. Speed and silence and no wearing down. That was the hinge on which the whole future turned. The first machines built this way were monsters. They filled entire rooms, threw out tremendous heat, and consumed enough power to dim the lights. In 1945, in Pennsylvania, one of the greatest of them was switched on. It was called ENIAC, and it was the universal idea made physical for the first time, vast and hot and alive with calculation. And it was run by people, real, named people. 6 women were chosen to program that enormous machine, among them Jean Jennings Bartik and Betty Snyder Holberton. They wired its logic by hand, traced faults through a labyrinth of cable, and invented the very techniques of programming as they went, for there was no manual and no language to follow. They were mathematicians and engineers. The machine did nothing at all until they told it what to do. Then came the insight that quietly changed the shape of everything. In those early years, instructing a machine meant physically rebuilding it, rewiring it by hand for each new task. Then, in 1945, the mathematician John von Neumann set down in writing an idea that had been forming across the whole community of pioneers, Turing among them. The instructions themselves, he argued, could be stored inside the machine, held in the very same memory as the numbers it worked on. A computer could keep its own orders in its head. This is the stored program, and it is the single idea that explains the device on your desk. Because the instructions live inside, you can change them without touching a wire. The same machine becomes a typewriter, then a darkroom, then a library, then a voice that answers you, all by holding different instructions in its memory. One object, endless purposes. That is why your phone can do 10,000 things its makers never imagined. So now we have a universal idea, given an electronic body, able to be re-instructed without being rebuilt. Magnificent, but still the size of a room. The last act of our story is the shrinking. The great electronic switches were fragile glass tubes, hot and prone to failure. Then, in 1947, at Bell Laboratories in America, 3 physicists named John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley produced something extraordinary. They called it the transistor. It was a switch made from solid material, tiny, durable, and cheap to produce. The thing that had filled a room could now sit on a fingertip. And once it was small, it began to get smaller still. In 1965, an engineer named Gordon Moore noticed something about the pace of it. Not a law, but a trajectory. Year upon year, the number of these switches that could be packed into the same small space kept climbing, while the cost kept falling. It was not a rule of nature, and clever people have predicted its end many times. But for decades it held, and the machine kept shrinking, doubling in capability and halving in size, generation after generation, until the room became a cabinet. The cabinet became a box, and the box became the slim object you carry in your pocket. At each of these leaps, the same uneasy question surfaced in the public mind. The universal machine, the electronic brain, the shrinking chip. Each arrived to people who quietly wondered whether they were being served by it or replaced by it. And each time, the honest answer held. The machine extended what a human being could do. It did not stand in for the human at all. Which brings us back to the device in your hand. The intelligence you speak to is the direct electronic descendant of that 50-year labor. A universal idea from Turing, given an electronic body, taught by von Neumann and his contemporaries to store its own instructions, then shrunk relentlessly from the transistor onward until it could run in your hand. When you are told today that the machine thinks, you now know precisely what is physically happening beneath that word. It is switching, storing, and executing instructions at a scale too vast to picture. Whether that earns the word thinking is a judgment I will leave entirely with you, now that you can see the machinery for yourself. What looks like sudden intelligence is the latest visible layer on a deep and deliberate human quest. We have externalized our memory. We have wired the planet. We have built machines to aid our own thinking. Only now are all 3 aligned. What we choose to do with that is the story we turn to next. If this origin story has resonated with you, the most valuable thing you can do is subscribe and hold your place in this continuing masterclass. Once you have done that, the reading room in the description below holds a curated selection for those who wish to go deeper. The birth of the electronic computer, the lives of Turing, von Neumann, and the women of ENIAC, and the long human story of building machines to think alongside us. What sits in your pocket is not a stranger that arrived from nowhere. It is a single human idea, refined by hand and made smaller, lifetime after lifetime, until it became small enough to hold. The light moving through it tonight is the same light a generation of builders coaxed into doing arithmetic. And that light is still answering to a human hand. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the journey ahead.